I hope this is a really exciting part of the meeting going forward. So welcome back. We now turn to a highlight of our meeting, and as is celebrating the tremendous accomplishments of our awardees. As you know, the Science Board gives these awards to recognize individuals in their fields who have the highest honor in terms of our view as the board that oversees the science and engineering enterprise for the nation and advisors to the legislative and executive branches of Congress. Our 2025 Science and Society awardees are Rocco Mennella and Jane Hemelt, and our Vannevar Bush awardee is Robert Conn. Let's please give them a round of applause. And also, I'd like to recognize some guests in the back. Robert Conn's guest and Rocco and Jane's guest, please stand up, all of you. Now, we got it now? Because if you don't have people behind you, you can't do what you need. So spouses, former students, colleagues do count. Trust me. So the board just had the pleasure of spending time with them over lunch, and now we're excited to officially honor our awardees, after which the board's external engagement committee chair, Dorota Grejner-Brzezinska, I got that right. All right, will moderate a discussion. So let's begin with our two Science and Society awardees, Rocco Mennella and Jane Hemelt, a couple of STEM leaders in their truest sense. I personally have known Rocco and Jane for well over 30 years. They have been incredible mentors and heroes, and Rocco really helped me very well. Since when I was supposed to graduate in 1973, I did not get my high school diploma for another 23 years later, but that's another story that I'm sure we can talk about over dinner. The National Science Board Science and Society honors those who have tirelessly worked to increase public understanding and appreciation of science and engineering in the United States. And as you just heard previously with our industry leaders from NVIDIA, from Dow, and our VC community, they talked about the need for talent. And that needed to start early. Again, Ryan, thank you for all you did in bringing that and putting that task force. We can't wait till 17 or 18 years old to ask a young woman or a young man to get into STEM. It's just too late. So these recipients have demonstrated leadership by inspiring scientists to engage with the public, fostering inclusive excellence in STEM, and strengthening the relationship between science and the public. Again, sounds like a recurring theme we keep hearing. What is the value of science? Willie, you brought it up in the earlier discussion. Why should we care? And so if you start very early with that purpose-driven is what inspires folks to do and go into science. And you need, as we heard in our previous discussion, you need mentors and teachers and people who will do that. Rocco and Jane have done nothing short of that. As lifelong STEM educators, they are two of the many behind-the-scenes champions of our science and engineering ecosystem. They've inspired countless students from all backgrounds to climb the steep paths of science. Rocco and Jane, would you please come up to the podium? Rocco and Jane, I am delighted to present you with the National Science Board's 2025 Science and Society Award. The citation reads, for their long-standing service to helping students overcome educational barriers and achieve their full potential. Let's give them a round of applause. And I would ask the Mennella crew and Hemelt crew to please come up here for a picture. That includes you, TP, and Steve. Oh, no. Don't worry, Robert, your turn's coming next. Okay. We'll take care of you. New York Times first, then.
I think
Mark,
we
how's it going, sir?
face this way.
Right here. You got it on? Oh, now, before you leave, Rocco, we have a special thing for you and Jane. Mark, would you please be able to? Oh. What's up? Oh, I'm sorry. We have a special thing for you, so I will ask Mark, Sly, TP, Mr. Steve. So I believe this no longer exists anymore, but I believe it goes like, on the shores of the old Potomac, in the fields of rice, stands an old deserted outhouse known as the High.
You see if your meeting can, how's your meeting gonna follow that?
Please have a seat. Oh, now, Rocco, Jane, would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you, everyone. Today's a special day. I don't know why I'm standing here, but to me, it's very special. And there's two people here who were with me, except for you, at the very beginning of my high school career, and that's Sylvester Conyers and Mike Samortic. And then there's two wonderful ladies who were with me the last few years of my career, and that's Dr. Tamika Woodruff and Dr. Felicia Martin Latif. So to have both parts of my life here is very special. So thank you for coming. Like I said, I don't know why I'm standing here. It's really because of everyone who was with me along the path of my journey. And it's because of the blessings that I have received. I have the blessing of working with the most wonderful students in the science and technology program at Eleanor Roosevelt High School. Now, I came there in 1984, and the program started in 1976. So imagine this, back in 1976, there were only a handful of high schools that had a specialized program for students in math, science, and technology. So what I often say is that we were STEM before STEM was even a word. And I also say that we were always STEAM. And that's because we recognize with these talented high school students that you have to work with the entire person. You have to encourage them to go with some of your other passions, whether it's art or drama or music or their love of literature or history. It's a full person that we're working with. So I was blessed having students like that. Another blessing I had were the wonderful teachers that I worked with throughout my career. And in the science and technology program, we have about 1,000 students in the program. I had dedicated, hardworking students, teachers who recognize the talents, but also here's what the surprise is. Yes, these students were great, very talented, very smart. You would think, oh, they don't really need a teacher. But wait a minute, these are still teenagers with insecurities. They need motivation, and they need you to set the bar. Now, if you set the bar here, they're going to go here. If you set the bar here, they're going to rise to the occasion. If you set the bar here, which is what we do in the science and technology program, this is where they're going to go. And our job is to open doors of opportunities for students. I had another blessing, and that was with Howard Hughes Medical Institute. We had funding from them for over 20 years. Outside funding, which enabled us to do so many things for the students, giving them internship opportunities during the summer, working with the teachers, giving them time, precious time for teachers. You know, it's amazing how hard teachers work. And to expect them to do even more and more outside the classroom, that's just not right. It's just not right. And Howard Hughes Medical Institute knew that, and they funded so that these students, these teachers, excuse me, could have some type of stipend while they did all this extra work. With the funding from Howard Hughes, we were able to, because it was outside funding, purchase more and more equipment to be used within the curriculum. And because of Howard Hughes, these teachers had time to learn how to use the equipment. They had time to incorporate it into their classes. So I'm here today only because of these blessings, because of people who were with me in the beginning and people who were with me at the end, and someone who was with me all the time. And I do thank the National Science Board very much for this honor. That's not mine.
All right. 20 seconds. Come on.
Yeah, well, I wasn't as fortunate as Jane. When I started teaching, I taught at a school that students went to if they only couldn't get into a public high school. It was brutal. But by the time Vic and Steve and TP got there, it was kind of straightened out. Of course, Mark was there from the beginning, but it was something else. But I've been teaching for, I don't know, 57 years, still going. But I learned a lot from the students. Remember once in the early 70s at the Matheson, students approached me about starting a radio station. I said, what? I said, yeah, we can broadcast into study halls and into the library. I said, okay. So the brightest one I put in charge, and he was in charge of scheduling the DJs and the rooms and everything else. Well, it went along pretty good. Then came the big day. The administration decided that a student should say the morning Pledge of Allegiance. I said, yeah, great. So they selected the guy who was in charge of the radio station. I remember that day, I was up on the second floor walking up and down. Students had their hands over their hearts looking at the loudspeaker. It was all going pretty good. So we got down to with liberty and justice for a few. I said, wait a minute. That's not the way that ends. And then the doors all banged open and the teachers were running down to the communications room to do something bad. Anyway, that was the end of the radio station. That was a pretty brave student. Oh, who was that? That was Dr. Vic McCrary. And he had a very high average. In fact, at graduation, he was seated in the row of honor with him and 4 other guys. And oh yeah, he didn't graduate, although he went to college. Some teacher hunted him down, wasn't me, and told the dean that he didn't have a degree, a high school diploma. So the dean suggested, well, get a GED, and he did. And the dean said, fine, you got a high school diploma now. And he did not get his high school diploma until he got his PhD. Oh, he did a lot of other stuff too. Anyway, I am highly honored by this award, highly. I think the last time I had interaction with the NSF was when I first graduated from college. They had sponsored a program where you can get your master's degree in math in 5 summers. And I did that. When we first started, this was at Catholic U. We took a photograph at the shrine. We filled the shrine steps. 5 years later, when I graduated, there were 5 of us. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm highly honored by this.
Anyway, thank you. Let me now turn to the Vannevar Bush awardee, Robert Conn. The board's Vannevar Bush honors exceptional, and I mean exceptional, lifelong leaders in the fields of science and technology. Award recipients demonstrate outstanding intellectual merit, dedicated public service, and significant contributions to science writ large. Robert Conn, as a pioneer of fusion engineering and an extraordinary leader in both science and philanthropy, has proven himself exemplary in all 3 categories. Bob, could you please join me at the podium? That's okay. And if Bob's support team would like to join us, you're more than welcome, please, to come on up for the photo. Bob?
Carol and Claudia.
Right. That's right. Thank you.
Sure. Would you like to get one of the 2 of us?
Sure. First of all, I'm delighted to present you with the National Science Board's 2025 Vannevar Bush Award. The citation reads, "For his pioneering leadership in fusion engineering, his public service to the nation, and his visionary initiative of science philanthropy." Let's give Bob Conn a hand. You got that? Please come on.
Oh, boy. I wasn't expecting this.
Well,
It's all right. Here.
Teamwork makes the dream.
Yeah, come close.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shall we go sit down?
Thank you.
No. Would you like to say a few words, Bob?
Yes, but I would like to ask a favor. Can I sit at the seat and just
You
turn on the
can.
speaker buttons?
Go ahead.
It'd be a lot more convenient.
Oops.
We turn this on. Does this work? Okay. Well, I got a call from Dario Gill back in March, and it was stunning. I was completely surprised, of course, honored, and I'm humbled. I've looked at who has won this award in the past. My graduate school office mate, Jim Dudestadt, won it in 2013. Some of my friends like Neil Lane and Dick Atkinson, both former directors of NSF, are winners. And last year's winner, John Hennessy, is a close friend. We were deans of engineering in the late 90s together. And then when I became president of the Kavli Foundation, we had a Kavli Institute for Astrophysics and Particle Physics at Stanford. And he and I worked together to raise additional endowment funds. Endowment funds, the most important type of private philanthropy you can give a university, because it's forever. So I am humbled. Now they asked, give a few remarks about your background, you're this, you're that. I think you all have had a chance to read about the background, and I don't want to really say more about that. This is an opportunity for me, having been in science policy as well as technically at the bench, to say something about the state of science as we see it today. I'm very concerned. what I think is happening is not evolution, but revolution. And there's a big difference. And what's happening is deconstruction, for example, of agencies. That's a big difference from a slight budget cut or a slight budget advance. What are the implications of this for the nation? I think they're profound and long-term. The profoundness comes from the fact that we know from deep work the relationship between federal support for research and development and economic growth. In 2023, 2024, several economists at the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas did an extraordinary study of what was the correlation between federal R&D spending and business economic growth. And I read the paper. I'm not an economist, but I'm a theoretical physicist. So I understood the math, variational principles, optimization theory. Goes back to Paul Romer's Nobel Prize winning economic work at Chicago in the late 1980s. So strong stuff and very likely right. And what did they conclude? For the last 80 years, 20% of business economic growth is due to federal spending on R&D. 20%. That's a fifth of the economic growth of the country in terms of business, which grows is the most important in some sense. So there's no really question in my mind about the relationship between federal funding of R&D and economic growth, particularly of businesses. What can you expect if you cut federal R&D funding by 25%, 50%? The proposed cut for NSF is 50%, NIH is 25%, DOE is 15%. I mean, these are serious cuts. We're not talking about 2 or 3%. And they are likely to be lasting. So what are the long-term implications of all of this? Well, there's long-term implications of this, and there's one other piece of the story. I'll start with a baseball metaphor. I played baseball as a young person, got into the Yankee minor league area, so I got pretty far in it all. Suppose I said to you that in the major leagues today, we're not allowed to have any foreign-born players. Yeah, I mean, you're shocked, aren't you? And you should be. Suppose we eliminated the 30% of the players born elsewhere who are playing in the major leagues today. Would the game be better? Would they be sharper? Would everything be better or not? It's obvious, right? And in the last 25 years, 25 of those players have won the Most Valuable Player award. So that's analogous to what goes on in business. So I'll give you one last statistic. If you look at the market capitalization of the largest companies in the United States, the top 10 by market cap, so value, right? You guess how many of the CEOs were born abroad? 50%. Half the CEOs of the top 10 by market cap companies in the United States were born abroad, came here for education, particularly graduate education. And they're leading Microsoft, they're leading Google, they're leading Tesla and NVIDIA and so on. So we have two issues. One is the state of science, which I think is in trouble, and it means trouble for the country. That's why I'm emphasizing it. And we are faced with weakening our ball team. We're limiting the best and the brightest from coming to the United States, which has been a hallmark of the United States for 80 years. So we're not going to field the best team of scientists in the future if we spend 5 or 10 years limiting the best and the brightest from coming. So as the Quakers say, speak truth to power. And this is a public meeting. and it's a government agency. And I think what I've spoken is truth to power. So thank you for giving me the platform.
Thank you, Bob, Jane, and Rocco. Let me now turn to Dorota to kick off the discussion.
Thank you, Victor. And once again, congratulations. And we are delighted that you could be here with us to accept your awards. And we all look forward to hearing a little bit more about your personal stories, about your personal journey. And I'm about to ask you to do something close to impossible, because each one of you is asked to use no more than 5 minutes to tell us about your journey, how you got to STEM, why you do it, what you do, and also tell us about this one thing that really surprised you on your journey. Would you like to start, Rocco?
Well, well, that's amazing. We didn't have microphones when I was first teaching. No, well, we didn't. No, I mean, I kind of lucked out because I started teaching in a school that had nothing, no curriculum. Students were mainly criminals. So I was able to do stuff, you know. When I first got there, there was 4 math courses, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, and Trig. When I left, we had 11 full-time math teachers teaching from pre-algebra to Calculus 3. Also, I brought in computers into the school. Started off with being able to do all our report cards and billing and tests, and brought in computer curriculum, computer programming. Now, I don't know why. I think it was because grammar school was good to me. I was pretty good in math and science, so I wasn't so good in college. I went to college in the 60s, and I don't know if you remember the 60s, but wow. Anyway, I finally graduated from college, got my first master's degree thanks to the NSF, and just doing it. That's all, because like right now, I teach in 3 different departments: physics, math, and engineering. And I always wanted to be the sharpest thing. I always had to know everything I could about what I was going to teach, and say it in a way that people can understand it. And I think I did that. And I never took a note. Everything was always in my head. And I had a lot of jokes too. Like you're in a dark room and you got a box of candles and you got 30 seconds to get out. There's a door someplace in the room, but it's dark. What do? You don't have anything to light a candle with. Well, here's what you do. Of course, I let the students guess. You take a candle out of the box, and that makes the box a candle lighter. Yeah, all my jokes were like that. I mean, so I have a bunch of them, but no. But anyway, I just kept trying to get better and better at what I did, and then I guess I kind of did that. But that's it for 57 years.
Is there anything that surprised you on your journey?
Well, the things that surprised me are the students. I mean, they believed in me, I guess, because they responded, and they continued to respond even today.
Wonderful, thank you, Jane.
Well, I guess I always liked math starting in 1st grade. And then I had my first chemistry course in high school from a wonderful teacher. And I always knew I was meant to be a teacher. And I had teachers who truly inspired and made a difference for me. And that's what I wanted to do also. So what really opened the world of STEM to me, however, even though I taught a lot of math and science, was when I was lucky enough to start teaching at Eleanor Roosevelt High School. And here, as I said before, was a specialized program for students who were gifted in math and science and engineering. And they were wonderful students to work with, but they needed you. They needed good teachers. They needed that guidance. And then because I was coordinator for 33 years, and I saw how we prepared the students for their next step and what they became. They were engineers, doctors, scientists, environmentalists, everything you could possibly think of. And even those who decided later, well, I like math and science, but it's not what I want to do with the rest of my life. They still had the skills and the tools to know how important education, especially STEM education, is. And I think the thing that surprised me the most was not just the ability of the students, but seeing them, they're just regular kids who are smart, who want to do well, but they have the same needs as any other students, and they need the support. And another thing that surprised me was within this wonderful group of students, there was still a range of abilities, but we weren't addressing the top of the top. And I recognize that because we had students who before senior year, for example, completed calculus. Well, there was no other way, no other higher level course that they could take until working with Catholic University, we set up a program where a teacher from Catholic University, Rocco, came to the school and taught the students Calc 3 and differential equations. Now, how many high school students graduate with at least 16 credits of higher level math? And one other thing that surprised me was that some of these bright students told you and told me, you know, I don't need a full year of pre-calc. So here's what we did. We developed a summer pre-calc program. So students who were approved for the program came in, and if successful, they actually started calculus a year early. And the amazing thing that happened was Rocco said, I'm going to use the students who already completed calculus to be our student mentors, to work with the students. And I would walk into the classroom before the class even started, and here are our leaders up at the board working problems out with the kids. So the ability of these kids is amazing, but never forget they need the support, they need the confidence, and they need the guidance.
Thank you so very much. I think somewhere over the last few decades, we may have lost something, because I don't think our students would now come and try to learn math in summer. And I'm not even sure if we have teachers as dedicated as you have been and your colleagues to really empower them to understand that they actually can learn and they are perfectly wonderful talent. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the story and all you've done. Robert, over to you.
Well, the life story in 5 minutes, right? So I'll just say that I came from parents, neither of whom got past 9th grade. They were children of the Depression. And my father lost my grandfather at 10 years old, and he was out delivering groceries for a nickel a bag. And, you know, they were struggling to get through. But I had, luckily, two very bright parents. and they were keenly interested in education. And so I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, out by Coney Island. And when I got to the 7th or 8th grade, and I did fairly well in school. I didn't compare one to another. I didn't know about that stuff. I just did what I could do. I came home one day with a letter. We think your son should take the test to go to one of the special high schools in New York. Now, this is before Sputnik. And I talked to my parents. They said, go for it. Now I'm 11, and I'm going to have to take the subway to high school. 11. I took the test. I got into Brooklyn Technical High School, and it made all the difference. I had teachers like you and deeply committed to mathematics, and I discovered I was good at mathematics, and I really liked physics. And biology, I couldn't understand biology. I got to college through baseball, but not through a scholarship, but the fact that I played ball and was a good catcher. And Pratt Institute came calling, and I didn't have any money. And they offered full tuition, half room and board, and a job. Can't beat it. Now, I got into Michigan and I got into Penn and so on and so forth, but the money wasn't there to be able to do it. And yet I got to go to a private liberal arts college that happened to have engineering, and it made my life. It made my life because of the liberal arts side of things. What made my life on the technical side of things? Well, I did very well at Pratt, but I was the first and only student ever to go from Pratt to Caltech. Now, I don't know what Caltech was thinking in 1964, but I had an NSF fellowship. I had an Atomic Energy Commission fellowship. I had a Ford Foundation fellowship. Those were some days. And I chose Caltech, best choice of my life without question, no surprise, I think. My graduate school office mate for 3 years was Jim Duderstadt, former chair of this board. So we went to school together, and when I got out, I sort of knew what I was to do. I was in nuclear engineering, wanted to save the world. I was very worried about the climate. I spent 4 years in Pasadena, and I couldn't see the mountains. Don't forget, I couldn't see the mountains for 9 months a year. It was terrible, right? And so nuclear power was going to save the world. It was an environmentally clean way to go, and it involved nuclear physics, and boy, did I find my calling. I got to Wisconsin, the great University of Wisconsin, in 1970, and there were already nuclear power plants built, and the big academic issue was now nuclear safety, the safety of these reactors. Crucially important problem. But not to me bleeding edge kind of physics and engineering combined. But plasma physics and fusion energy was just the right thing. So I spent 10 years at Wisconsin inventing the field of fusion engineering with a great partner, Jerry Kolsinski, also a member of the National Academy of Engineering, as I am. And the two of us really put down the rules of the game. What do you think about when you have to think about putting a fusion energy system together as a complete system? Not a trivial task. I ended up 10 years at Wisconsin, moved to UCLA, stayed at the bench until my mid-40s, really. And that's the technical side of what the award's about. In '93, I went down to UC San Diego. They had an engineering division. It was ranked 44. And the charge was, get it up there. Well, it was a terrific run. And in 9 years, we went from 44 to 11. And today it's ranked 9. So it was a sustaining effort. It wasn't just a blip that didn't continue. From that point, I did some venture capital. And so I learned a lot of economics and how to do investing. And the last part of my career, if I could put it that way, was a bit of a surprise to be president of a science-based foundation. That was going back to my first love, the Kavli Foundation. And through the Kavli Foundation, we have supported institutes. I was talking with someone who was visiting at Delft recently. We have a Kavli Institute in Nanoscience at Delft. I mentioned the one at Stanford and so on. There's 20 around the globe, but a majority always in the United States. So 11 or 12 are in the US. Anyway, to bring it to closure, one of the questions I asked my staff, we focused on astrophysics, nanoscience, and neuroscience. And I know nanoscience pretty well. And I said, what are the opportunities at the intersection of nanoscience and neuroscience? And you all would probably guess detectors, measurement. Well, we got the neuroscientists, 20 of them, together with the nanoscientists. And George Church, bless his heart, said at the end of the meeting, I think we could map the functioning brain. To which the neuroscientists went crazy. You're out of your blasted mind. But the nanoscientist said, we can make the measurements that you need, and you don't have to continue to just stick electrodes into the brain. That idea, they wrote a white paper. The white paper was about mapping the functioning brain. 18 months later, and I said to them, go for it. And Kavli gave them the money to meet and so on. So I didn't have to worry about any money. They went to Washington, they met, I knew John Holdren, who was the science advisor at the time. Got a meeting for them. I said, go have a meeting, listen very carefully, make sure you come back at a second meeting to answer all the questions. When they answered the questions at the second meeting, Francis Collins said, there's a pony in this. 18 months later, we were in the White House and President Obama announced the BRAIN Initiative. And you quoted in the press release, $5 billion over a decade. But we had to raise private money, and they asked us, could you partner with philanthropy? And fell to me, and we raised $250 million in matching philanthropic money. So between that and developing the Science Philanthropy Alliance, which is a separate story during a break, it became an arc where you're at the bench for 20, 25 years. All you want to do is the science. And then suddenly you mature a little bit and you find out you've had leadership capabilities and you go into leadership and start institutes, Dean of Engineering. I started a startup company, so I said when I was finished with academic life, a venture capital company came calling. Okay, so we go to do that, and finally, back to basic science and philanthropy. It's been a wonderful journey, and I wouldn't trade it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those stories. Can we have a few more minutes, Vic? We have a permission. Yeah, I mean, we've had those phenomenal stories, and I'm sure my colleagues are really waiting to ask you at least a few questions. So the floor is open for questions. Melvin?
Have you taught average students, not just gifted students?
Oh, I've taught students who didn't know how to write their own name. Yes, I've taught a lot of low-level students and, of course, a lot of high-level students.
Could you have any advice? I'm a mathematician. I do teach mathematics.
Oh, right. That's great.
So, and the problem I have is the average students. How do you get them enthused? How do you get them to want to?
I don't know. I guess I'm from New Jersey, so I learned how to speak everybody's language. And when you learn how to speak a student's language, they listen, and they perform. But I never thought that much of myself, so maybe that's part of it.
Thank you.
Can we ask you to come to the microphone, please?
I can speak real loud if you want me to. Okay, so I didn't move this very quick.
Mr. Mennella has a gift with any student to accept them where they are, to where they need to be. And that's very important because it begins to establish belief in the person. You can do this. It's not that hard, but you can do it if you put your mind to it and you rely on me to show you how to do it step by step. And all you have to do is tell me I'm lost. And we'll get back on the path and I'll do it. It's the same sorts of things. But that's why, when you ask about why an average student, he doesn't look at it as average. He looks at what do you know, what don't you know? And how do I get you there? I can do it because I'm Rocco Ronald Mennella.
All right, do we have time for one more question? Marvi?
So throughout the years and your experience, you have lived incredible lives and you have been exposed to also not just evolution, but revolutions, right? And so when it comes to information technology and the availability of information and how easy it is to find news and ideas these days, what is your advice when it comes to communicating science and ensuring that people are aware of the truth, right? Of aware of what's real, aware of what is advancement. What is your advice when it comes to managing science communication?
Well, if I could start, we had at Kavli a public communications program addressing exactly those questions. I would say it's a very hard problem because you have so many to reach. Now, one of the advantages, and you got to look at where are the people going to see if you can reinforce where they're going to the places that would help with respect to understanding what science is and trying to wheat from chaff, right? And more parents take their children to science museums than take them to ball games. It's an interesting statistic. So the schools are a place where you try to build public understanding of science, not just of science, but the scientific method. Part of our problem today is people don't believe in science. There's an alternative world out there and alternative facts. It's an oxymoron to talk about an alternative fact. There's either a fact or it's not a fact. So getting people to appreciate how you come to a deeper understanding of nature. It's just nature we're talking about when we're talking about science. I'm not talking politics. I'm talking about what's an atom, how does it work, why does it do this and not do that. Those are things that people could come to understand. And you could point out as they gain their understanding, that's what understanding is. I'm not guessing at this. I'm measuring it. And the difference between being able to measure and having an opinion is enormous. And making that distinction for people can be very helpful. They suddenly are surprised. Oh, you measured it. That must be right. They don't use truth. You shouldn't use the word truth. But you can say, well, that's the correct answer because I did the measurement. 25 other people did the same measurement. They all got the same answer, plus minus 3%. That's the answer, okay? And that's how the scientific method works. I can't prove it's right, but I can prove it's wrong. I haven't been able to prove it wrong. Might be right, at least for a few centuries. And that's so different from having an opinion about whether mathematics matters, whether people are biased when they teach mathematics or science, whether they teach a funny kind of science. There is no such thing as a funny kind of science. So I think those are the sorts of principles where you stick to basic facts and let them draw the conclusion that it might be basic truths as well.
Thank you. Actually, I lied. I have one more question. So this would be the last question. So you are all leaders, doers, thinkers, and I don't believe that there is nothing that you are thinking of to do next. Can you just tell us very quickly what's next? What are you thinking of tackling next?
Well, I'm going to retire. I mean, I've been doing this for 57, 58 years, full time, all the time, summers, winters, springs. And I always had everything in my head, always. I never took a note, never. Now, lately, I found myself taking notes. I said, oh my, I guess the end is near. So I'm getting ready to retire.
This time for real, right? Jane.
What's next for me? What's next for me? To help out where needed in the school system. At the high school I was at, Eleanor Roosevelt High School, they have a new person in my position. So I'm always willing to go in and assist with her and help her along the way. I live in College Park. I'm on the educational committee for the city. And I'm looking to do some more volunteer work. And then with him being home all the time, I'm going to have a big adjustment. So.
That's a big challenge. Thank you, Jane. Robert, you have the last word.
Well, I actually am retired. But I think people like you and us don't really retire. So I got myself back affiliated with UC San Diego, but not with the engineering school, but with the School of Global Policy and Strategy. And I brought to a political science colleague and an economist colleague the idea that philanthropy plays a very significant role in the discovery ecosystem of the United States. And it's a unique advantage. There's no place on earth that gives the way we give, going back to the days of Carnegie and Rockefeller and so on. It turns out, and I won't go on too long, but I'm a scientist. I have numbers. It turns out, if you look, the federal government in 2024 spent $55 billion on basic and applied science as defined by the National Science Foundation, those two categories, not development, not translation, just basic and applied science. I would ask you to have a number in your head as to what proportion of that you think might be spent in the United States coming from either direct philanthropy or the legacy of philanthropy, which is the endowments at these universities, which pay out 5% every year, and now it'll be 4%, unfortunately. That's a mistake because it gets spent on science as well as on undergraduate students. But in any case, have a number in your mind. So the answer is $22.5 billion comes from all private sources. 16.7 billion is legacy philanthropy plus current giving. So these are big numbers. They move the needle. And we discovered this over the last 3 or 4 years and have been publishing about it. So that's been a fun challenge, keeps your neurons going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful, amazing stories. And let's give them one more round of applause.